referring to what has been called the climate justice. Basically, how can we help countries like Egypt, Africa, and other emerging economies who have not caused the climate crisis, but rather have been victim or are becoming victims of it. And I have been saying since a few months now, since we started talking about or thinking about the project, Gamal and I, that Egypt is not a big polluter, it's actually a big victim. So is the case with many of countries like us. However, mitigation, what the carbon markets that we have been discussing since the beginning of this session are actually designed for financing mitigation. And as you have rightly mentioned, Dr. Abla, this is not the only thing that we should be concerned about. We should look at mechanisms to finance adaptation. How can we make it possible for financial flows to be available to finance adaptation? Now, unless carbon market designs and the conventions, starting from the Kyoto Protocol and what has been presented regarding the organization of carbon markets, unless it's redesigned to specifically allow, for example, what has been mentioned regarding the benchmark, and you asked a very relevant question for forests in Africa. They have been offsetting and they will continue to offset, but the concept of additionality, which was presented by Fenella in the beginning, is one of the stumbling blocks in actually generating a new stream of revenue that could become a source for adaptation. And so unless the carbon markets regulation, international regulations are designed, we will remain working with such carbon markets to finance mitigation only, exclusively. But as also mentioned by Gamal, we are now in a global environment where the financing is becoming more difficult than it was when we were in Glasgow, and even more complex than when we were in Paris. And the commitments made will be very difficult to meet. So it's actually good to have funds such as ours and mitigation mechanisms, financing mechanisms that the one presented today, to be able to relieve some of the demand on finance, so it can be directed to adaptation. So private sector assumes a bigger share of mitigation financing as long as the business case is there, and at the same time have concessional financing or public money available for adaptation to help countries like us and African countries and other countries around the world deal with the adaptation challenges, which are very, very serious. And it's actually quite a serious climate injustice. So I thank you for asking the question, and I wanted to share these thoughts with you in a way, suggesting that you should have another session around how can we finance adaptation exclusively. I mean, carbon markets right now either need to be redesigned, or we have to look at how can we make adaptation projects bankable or financially sustainable through risk mitigation, whatever mechanism. We should discuss this separately in another session. Now, to the project that I'm working with Gamal on, and why it's relevant for countries like Egypt, and especially in urban centers. We will be financing mitigation, which is relevant still, although we are not big polluters, but we still have our own domestic challenges. I would call it microclimate challenges. Our urban centers are heavily polluted, our delta urban centers as well, storage of water, waste management issues in the country, and so on. So the fund aims to raise private capital to finance projects that will reduce emissions There are not, I will give two examples that are quite sufficient for the moment, but this is the model that has been used in generating a pipeline, which is now approaching £1 billion Egyptian pounds worth of investment that can generate offsets in the shape of returns to the investors who will come with us and the fund. One example, and a very, very promising one, is in the transport sector, where we are talking about or discussing with a number of companies that own vehicle passenger transportation fleets. And there is a reason why we are talking about passenger, because cargo is the technology has yet to be developed to be effective in terms of cost and logistics, to be able to retrofit trucks carrying cargo, which is also quite a substantial contributor. Yet it's possible to do the retrofitting from diesel and petrol engines to electric vehicles, electric motors in these vehicles. We also dealing with fleets for a simple reason, at least for the moment, because the infrastructure for recharging is yet to be developed in Egypt, although it has been starting and it's starting to emerge, but yet it's not possible for any owner of a vehicle to retrofit and rely on an infrastructure for charging their vehicles. So we deal with fleets because at the end of the day, the fleets goes back to one location where the charging can happen. And we will be financing the retrofitting of the vehicles, and the deal would be that basically in return for the finance, we will be getting the carbon credits as explained by Gamal, and the will be verified as also mentioned. The process follows very much what Fenella mentioned at the beginning, which is we are using the gold standard. We have already set up in place an arrangement for verification and validation and certification by Gold Standard and its sister institutions. And that will be the way it works. So we will have the auditor audit the emission offsets, which we will then, the property of which will be then transferred to the fund and then give it to the investor who invests with us in the shape of return. This one example is retrofitting. The second one, which is my favorite one because it's enormously promising, is the recycling of PET bottles, the single-use plastic bottles. I am really in debt. We are really in debt to Dr. Laila Skandar, who has developed this concept and has already tested it. It's been rolling out for close to 2 years, and I think Dr. Abla knows about it very well. The beauty of this solution is that not only does it achieve emission reduction by offsetting the need to produce virgin PET, but also that the fact that actually generates jobs for poor and specifically women who are very much active in the collection system that Dr. Laila has designed and developed and tested. And currently we have been in discussion with her for a number of months now, and extremely impressive model that she had developed with huge logistics dealing with large number of tonnage of PET and very promising growth potential. I mean, I don't think I should take more time, Dr. Abla, but these are the points. My first point is, let us please work together to see how we can design or redesign rather the carbon markets, or find another in another session and another roundtable dedicated only to adaptation to answer the question that you raised, which I share. I sincerely share the concern that you raised. So I think we should do that. And the second, then I explained some examples of the project that we will be financing and the impact from actually the value that returns to countries like us is not the contribution to climate action globally, because we are not big polluters, but we are actually doing this also for our selfish reasons, basically cleaning our urban environments and our landscape to make it a better quality of life for Egyptians.